So welcome to the first video on biological world. So I'm going to talk briefly about the first few chapters in the book really. The first chapter is all about cells and living things. It moves on then to reproduction, and that moves on to evolution. But trying to keep the concept of sustainability as part of our everyday teaching, it's no harm to keep that common theme. So when we speak about living things and how they're built up, we can move forward then to talking about reproduction. And as we know, the two types of reproduction are asexual and sexual. Now the core theme here, I think, to try to keep within the curriculum specification, is to keep in mind about variation in the offspring. So organisms that reproduce asexually show little or no variation in the offspring, whereas organisms like ourselves and flowering plants that reproduce sexually do show variation in the offspring. Now we've just come through a pandemic, and we know that different people had different resistances to the pandemic. So that being a recent memory in all of our minds, we can look at variation in the offspring as being a good thing to resist any challenge going forward. And in terms of evolution, when organisms do reproduce, if there is variation in the offspring, then they are more likely to be able to meet any challenges going forward that they might meet in their own environment, as we met COVID in the last couple of years. So when you're speaking about asexual and sexual reproduction, and leading on then, of course, to genetic crosses, it's no harm to mention that good characteristics in organisms pass through to the next generation. And that leads us then into evolution in chapter 3 and Darwin's observations. And in Science Works, I've tried to keep this very simple in one big picture in terms of organisms. The organisms that show strong characteristics actually being chosen by nature itself. It's nature that does the selecting. So Darwin's theory of evolution by natural selection tells us that nature itself chooses the organisms that it wants to survive. And those organisms that survive due to stronger characteristics, perhaps, if they survive, then they are going to be the remaining organisms that reproduce. And they will pass those strong characteristics on to the next generation and give the next generation a better chance of survival. And the more organisms that survive, the better, because that leads to a greater biodiversity going forward.